Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Commissioner Gabriel Calatrava.
Good morning. The MAS has been proud to work with New York City as an advocate for the protection, modernization, and beautification of our city's waterfront for over 100 years. Between the existing revitalization of the Shoreline's neighborhood, devastating impacts of Superstorm Sandy, and the potential value of our waterfront and the threats facing them are more in the public eye than ever. And so, I am delighted to introduce our next speaker, New York City Department of Design and Construction Commissioner Feniosky Peña-Mora.
Thank you, Gabriel. Again, welcome, and I'm really pleased to be here, and I think I want to thank the MAS for actually inviting me to be talking to you. And I do not have any PowerPoint presentation, but I'm going to use the best imaging processing unit that one can have, that is your brain. So when I'm talking, I want you to imagine what I'm saying and use your imagination to visualize what I'm talking about. So the first thing that I want to talk to you is about Superstorm Sandy. And I want to see what do you remember? What do you see in your mind about Superstorm Sandy? And I would like to have a volunteer to raise their hand and let me know what they see. Yes?
Flooding.
Flooding. Okay. Any other person?
It completely flooded our hospital.
The hospital flooded? Yeah.
Blackout.
Blackout? Anybody else?
Citizens responding faster than government.
Citizens responding faster than government. Okay. That's an interesting one. Okay. I think people can imagine that very visually.
The idea that elderly residents were trapped on 5 floors.
I think that's a key part. Trapping, flooding, blackout. So, and actually hospitals.
New term, resilience.
Huh?
Coining the new term called resilience.
Okay, so that's key, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. The after effect and what we have done. Well, actually, this is something that is not really new, but what we notice is that how vulnerable we are as a city and what we need to do. But going back to the images that you actually are seeing, and I think somebody may have seen the transportation system also being inundated, and the water flowing into the tunnels, and how that much paralyzed some part of the city. So what we see there is how we as a city became more or less trapped because of Mother Nature. And it's something that we can try to really understand, we can try to master, we can try to tame it. But there is something that we all know, that Mother Nature really are able to outsmart us. And we always have to be really running ahead and trying to see how we protect. In addition to that, we also know that we as humans, for some reason, we are looking always for risk, because we go to places where not necessarily is the best place for you to build, because you are in a flooding zone, and we cannot forget because some of these events are called extreme events. And as extreme events, they don't happen every time. They happen every so often, and sometimes our memory fades, and we say, well, what is people talking about that we are at risk? I haven't seen that. I have lived all my life here, and nothing has happened. That rain, that snowstorm, that was a breeze for me. I was having hot chocolate, and I just had a fun time with my family. So people tend to forget what really disasters can look like, and that's why they call extreme event. But I think Superstorm Sandy kind of reminds us how vulnerable it is. And I think what our fellow here in the audience said about The response of the public versus the government, well, we all know, and we saw it in 9/11, and we have seen it in a lot of different disasters, that when the disaster occurs, you know, a lot of times the best of people come up. You know, the fellowship, the community sense to help out. And that sometimes usually is good, sometimes can get out of hand, and how you actually don't trip into each other becomes an issue when everybody is trying to help without an organized method. So we need to really look and see, how do we learn from that? How do we learn from the lesson? And I can tell you that in the Department of Design and Construction, which I'm very honored to lead, we have taken some of those ideas of what Superstorm Sandy provided, some of those experiences, and we're able to actually implement it right away on some of the ongoing projects that we have. For example, we have Breezy Point. We were actually doing some work there, and we immediately raised the elevation of the facility in order to account not only for Superstorm Sandy, but also for the 500-year flood and the 2050 sea level rising. So we actually took some of the lessons, but those are in some of the projects that we had. But we now have to look at, how do we look holistically at the city, at the vulnerability. And some of you may remember in June, Secretary Donovan, actually with Mayor de Blasio and Governor Cuomo, presented to the city with some hot money for preparing a coastal resiliency program. And that was around $355 million that were given to New York to actually look at the resiliency of the Lower East Side. And this particular project goes from 23rd Avenue to Montgomery Street. So that's what the phase one of the competitions, and I don't know, some of you may remember, the competition of Rebuild by Design, in which the winning program was the Big U. And now we have rebaptized to Coastal Resiliency Program. And the first phase is the Lower East Side. Now, in the Lower East Side, can you tell me what we have from there, from 23rd to Montgomery Street? What are some of the very vulnerable areas that we have in that particular zone? NYCHA housing. So, as you can imagine, you know, with Mayor de Blasio, goal of reducing inequality and making sure that our city is one city built to last, we are very concerned on how to protect some of the vulnerable populations of our city. So this area of the Lower East Side becomes critical for us in order to ensure that if it were to happen another superstorm, we are able to actually take care of it and address any problem that may happen. Now, how do we actually do that? Do we do it just the old way of government trying to figure out a solution for everything without input from the community? Or do we use a combination in which we only have the community deciding what to do and how to do it? How do you think we should proceed? What will be the best way to proceed in those type of situations? Can be an either or? No, together. Has to be together. And that's, I think, the perspective that we have taken. And it's almost like having, and actually in the presentation of the Big U, they have this image of Robert Moses and Jane Jacobs. Okay, can you see that? Now, were they working together? So what we wanted is put them to work together. So we get the best of Robert Moses' planning, as well as Jane Jacobs' community activism and community input. So that's how we are actually looking at this lower coastal resiliency or coastal resiliency in order to ensure that the community is involved, that we are able to bring the notion of resiliency, of protection to our city, but at the same time take in consideration people, take in consideration programs that has to be executed, and take into consideration the different elements that the community has, the benefits and the things that people wanted to do. So when we are working on this, we actually have a very aggressive schedule to be able to realize this, and that schedule counts for us to be able to have a groundbreaking on this particular project by 2017 and be able to finish it off by the summer of 2019. As you can imagine, for us, that's actually warp speed. We are really going fast in order to ensure that we are able to provide the coastal resiliency and be ahead of the game. So this is only on some of the ideas that we're working. We are working also on Build It Back. And as you know, there are over 15,000 houses that still need to have work on them. Some of them has to be raised. Some of them has to be repaired. And we are actually working again with the community and looking at planning in order to ensure that we get the best world. So with that, I just want to thank you for listening to me and thank you for participating.